Okay, well, I think we are live. We are live. Great. Okay.
Right, hello.
So, yeah, welcome everybody. So this is this week's Sovereign Dialogue Reflection, where we take a little bit of time to focus on some of the themes that have emerged in this week's Sovereign Dialogue. Um, just to be transparent right from the top, uh, my car is due to be picked up by the um, car recovery service, so I may well have to end this quite abruptly when I get the phone call, which means they're outside about to tow my car away to get it fixed. So just to give everyone a bit of a warning about that. Uh, but we'll just
Also,
see how it all emerges.
just to also remember, Lorna was hoping to join us today, so do
Oh,
keep an eye open for her on
yeah, I will do.
YouTube.
Yeah, I can do that as well. Yeah, great. Fantastic. Thanks for reminding me about that. Good. So, yeah, we had some really interesting themes emerge this week, and one of the themes that emerged was from someone who was talking a lot about this idea of thinking of ourselves as a gift. And this idea that it's not selfish to think of ourselves in these terms, but that actually it's a way of expressing gratitude for, this incredible gift that we've been given, which is this human body. And I'm sure lots of people that are either listening in or watching the recordings are quite aligned or even fully aligned with this idea that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Is it that way around? No, we're human beings having a spirit. Anyway, whichever way around it is, it's that way around, isn't it? Yeah, we're spiritual beings having a human experience, and there is something about um just the joy of being alive, the joy of being human and having all of these complex
Mm,
emotions and feelings and appreciating, yeah, that sometimes it's really challenging, but also there's a huge amount of, joy and surprise and delight in all of that experience,
mm,
including the experience of aging and eldering, which was actually very specifically the area that this person was talking about. So, and I know for you, Thea, that eldering is this kind of wonderful topic that you've been exploring a lot of depth with Thurston and other people as well. So, again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that topic and what was shared in the Sovereign Dialogue this week.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I do. I think the way she expressed it of like just taking care of this gift of life, of bodies, of experience, of our pathway through however many years we have, and if we make it to be elders, then we've done well um, by anybody's standards. That this is a great, this is a great. It's not selfishness. It's an act of gratitude, and I think it's such a good way of seeing it, particularly when you do age. And there are things that come with aging. Hips is my thing that has come with aging that has been a bit annoying. Um, it's very easy to be down on the whole subject and to be down and to see it as a downhill process. Now, in some ways, I see myself as an elder. In some aspects of my life, I see myself as an elder or starting to step into that role or be available for that role. Um, and in some areas I don't. In some areas I still see myself more in a leadership role and very, very kind of hoping that I might get some elder support from someone else who's gone ahead of me. um, but it's out the to the kind of the idea of eldering that I think I'm seeing much more around me these days, which might just be because of my interest in it, but I think is also because people are paying it more attention, is that choice to make our older age, to make ourselves available in an older age as sources of um, wisdom, of mentoring, of support for following generations. And obviously, never to tell them what they need to do or think, but to give them context, to be the holders of myth and story for our societies and communities, so that there's always something for people to reflect on, and a broader experience of life for people to be able to draw on as they face the challenges of their own lives, particularly when they're in that, younger age, or where life comes very quickly, decisions have to be made quite fast maybe, and which can be very, very life changing and challenging at times. And I think our young people face huge challenges as they grow in our world today. um, and it's a way, I think, for yourself, of holding yourself and holding your ongoing life as continuing to have value and relevance in the world. I work with some people, and they say that one of the aspects of eldering is that you don't select yourself as an elder, you get selected by people. People come to you for your advice, and I kind of I like that, and I'm not sure I quite agree either. I think in order to be selected, you almost have to be willing to hold yourself in that role, and that people know that maybe they could come to you. You could support in conflict resolution with dispassion and with care, and kind of a sense of really caring, and but being able to hold the whole picture without being so invested maybe in one side or the other, for example. um, Being able to honor what's happening around us through some ceremony, some aspects of being able to hold ceremony and honor people in the marking moments of their lives, all sorts of things really. um, but above all, it's this sense of making our older age relevant, valuable, and of ongoing interest, to ourselves and other people, that I think is a really beautiful way to see it, and to celebrate that as a gratitude, um, is a very positive step,
Hmm.
in my opinion.
And it strikes me that part of what makes that possible is to live your younger years in that sovereign state. So, you know, the way you express your sovereignty will look very different in your teens than it will in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, right? So it's not about you being the wise 80-year-old in your 20s or teens. It's about living that life of being in your sovereignty in the different stages or waves of your life. Um, and then learning from that, right? Because
Mm,
part of that is that you're going to make mistakes and you're going to learn and expand, and
mm,
you know, so it's not about being perfect, but it is, I think, about maybe there are just some themes, and I am literally just kind of riffing as I'm speaking, but I think that there are some themes about trusting your intuition, trusting yourself,
mm,
not being so arrogant that you don't take other people's advice into account, but that you don't necessarily just blindly follow the advice or guidance of people who are perhaps older and more experienced, because you've got to be able to discern what's really going to work for you and what it is that you want to create, right? And what is true
mm,
for you. So I think kind of being true to yourself is one of those things, and trusting your intuition, trusting that inner voice is one of those aspects. And then I think also what comes with that is that ability to, take a stand and being able to speak up for the things that you believe in,
Yeah.
and the courage that that takes, but also the vulnerability that that takes. Um, and also the ongoing building capacity to deal with, potentially more and more challenging situations that kind of take you further and further out, you know, um, and expand your edge. So there's
Mm.
this feeling of, expansion. So I think that those are three or four aspects of sovereignty that I think if you pursue those, inevitably you're going to be tending towards eldering,
Yeah.
as the years go by and your life experience expands. Would you add anything else to that list?
Well, I think you've pretty much covered it, except I would emphasize the aspect of it that is trusting your own inner knowing and your inner voice. Because if I haven't learned to trust my own wisdom, the ideas that come from me, the the ways I get that it's true to solve issues and to move through my life, then I can't help anyone to trust theirs or give them those skills or support them in those skills to do that for themselves. So I do think that that feels like probably one of the most important things, but also having that sense of wholeness so that you can hold yourself as whole in an interaction with somebody younger who needs some sort of support from you, and that will protect both of you from you taking too loaded a stance for them, um, that is not going to help them, that or that doesn't see the nuances of their life or their era or what their world is like, for example, but assumes if you get too much in a sense of assuming so that's the balance, isn't it? It's trusting your own knowing but not assuming That's actually, there you go, that's an interesting line for us to explore with sovereign dialogue, I think, and sovereign leadership,
Mm.
that the difference, the nuanced difference between those two.
Yeah, the having a very clear vision of what you think and maybe what you want to create and how you want to create it, and at the same time taking on board that, well, actually this whole process of life itself is a co-created experience. So,
Mhm.
if I'm sovereign and everyone else is sovereign as well, then, it's important and honorable, respectful, to logical, actually, to take on board what other people are thinking, and take on board what it is that other people want to create. It's not that we have to agree with it or that we even have to, support them in it if we don't agree, but that there is this sense of having an understanding of those things,
Yeah.
and I think that that's really important. Mhm.
Yeah. And part of that then, because that then moves into some of the other, well, the main subject matter really this week, which was that connection with the airiness, the element of air that we've been exploring some of the core elements in the last few weeks. And this week we started the session with a meditation that kind of emphasized our connection with air as we breathe it in, but also our relationship with airiness and our ability to make ourselves lighter and to lighten the load a bit through our internal state, through how we feel our body, through how we decide our body is,
Mm.
um, and and into that realm of imagination and expansive kind of exploration as a part of that that I think again it goes back to the eldering conversation, because you need to be able to step into that openness in order to be able to support people at different stages of their own lives, and to be able to have both the expansive imagination but also the humility to be able to imagine what they're going to, but also to kind of just sit with what you actually hear, what you actually experience, what you actually notice is going on for them. And I think we've witnessed that today and on Tuesday very much in the way people fed back from that meditation and that embodied meditation of how simple the slip into that airiness was, and what a difference it made to some people who'd have very rushed, difficult days, and then suddenly they're in this space where they were just breathing and focusing on themselves and bring this beautiful lightness to bear. And for me, it just reminded me of that power we have to change our dynamic, to change our experience through our own way of approaching it, through a kind of a flick of the mind switch from, oh god, it's a tough day, and oh god, the traffic and the boss and the this and the that all came at me, into a space where I have a few moments now. I can just breathe. I can feel the air enter my lungs. I can feel my body move around that air. And then I can decide what that air is helping me do if I want to. If I want lightness, I can choose lightness. It's there for me, available to me. And I think that's that aspect of sovereignty and sovereign leadership is so important, that that choice that comes from awareness, such a key aspect of our model of sovereign leadership and of the joy, back to that joy of living again, uh, that isn't at the mercy of our lives, but puts us back in the driving seat of how we want to approach different aspects of our day, decision making, problem solving, whatever's going on.
Yeah, I love that. And of course, you could apply that then to any of the other elements, right? So in
Mm.
previous weeks, we've been doing earth and we've been doing water, and probably um, we'll probably do fire next week, probably, but I can't promise.
Seems a shame not to.
We haven't talked about that yet. But that there is something really um, beneficial in being able to consciously choose which of those elements you're um, seeing life from, like
Mm,
as a lens, like putting on glasses that have different tinted lenses in. You know, the earthy lens, the watery lens, the fiery lens, the airy lens, and that it just completely changes the way that you perceive the situation, and therefore it completely changes the options that are available.
mm,
So just being able to do that with your body is just such a profound exercise. And I was doing this with someone the other day, just very, very quickly, just getting them to focus on a on an object and with air, for example, just having a really wide visual range. So looking at an object, but being able to look at the walls on either side of you, and at the same time having a quite like light, chesty breath. And then
mm,
fire having a much more laser focused visual focus, but and having a more focused outward breath, um, like you were trying to blow out a candle, versus a more watery one, which was having a more diffuse
mm,
focus with your eyes, and a much more kind of like more like a belly breath, and so on and so forth. And
mm,
what this client was reporting back was, like, well, I'm just completely changing my relationship with this object. And so as and we can apply that to any situation, be that a physical object or an actual situation in our life, or just just an event that is happening or a belief that we might have.
mm,
So having that freedom, and of course, the four elements that we're talking about are just one way of doing it, and the archetypes would be another way of doing it. You've got four archetypes that you can embody that would completely change the way that you see a given situation. So there's real power and freedom in being able to do that.
mm. And so useful as well. I mean, the way we learnt it with Mark Walsh was through that being body storming an idea through the elements, kind of element storming it. So if you've got something you're working on, you can choose to see it from the perspective of Earth, steady, very slow, very fine detailed. Um, I get quite I get a very spiritual sense with Earth sometimes as well, kind of that sense of that grounded, soft, spiritual kind of feeling in it as well,
Mm.
or through wateriness, through hip movements and flow and connecting to people, and it being about relationships and bringing other people in. And then you can bring the fire to it, the action, the focus, the commitment, the boundaries, and
Mm.
you can bring the air into it, the openness, the floatiness, the creativity, the nothing's out of the pit, nothing's out of bounds
Yeah.
kind of approach. And it gives you this approach to an issue from which you can then go, oh well, that feels useful and that feels useful, and those I'm going to make those my focus.
Yeah.
Where when we see it in our normal lens of whatever our predominant relationship is with the elements or the archetypes or whatever the tool is we're using,
Mm.
we might generally be a fiery person in which we go, right, I'm just going to get in there and I'm going to, I'm going to ace it, or I'm going to sort it, or I'm going to get involved. And actually, if you've got that range, you can start to go, oh, hold on, there are other things I can do here. And it's just so brilliant, I think, to have that ability to remind ourselves that our first impulse is not necessarily the most valuable impulse. um, that we are powerful beings of infinite variety and choice, and so we never need to get stuck with what our automatic response is if we can just remember to stop, take a breath, and explore it a bit and be a bit curious.
Yeah, absolutely. Full range. The way it was always explained to me in my coaching training was um like the keys on a piano, and that you're by the time you get into your adulthood, you're very familiar with playing like a certain number of notes and a certain combination of notes. And there might be,
Be a certain key.
yeah, so there might be maybe 10 or 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 keys even that you're used to playing, right? But there are like 88 keys on the piano on the keyboard. So it's like, how do I how do I build my capacity to feel comfortable and familiar with all 88 of
Mm,
those? And
mm,
that doesn't mean that you have to use them. Um, but in order to practice them, you are going to need to use them in some way. But it doesn't mean that you have to use them all the time. It's just that you've got the freedom and the choice to be able to use them as and when you want to. And I
mm,
think that that's really important. So, um, um, to be very, like, so I remember in my coaching training, the we did this exercise where after the first sort of long weekend working together, where people, with permission, were given the opportunity to kind of like, what is it that people could see in you, but they'd like to see more of. And the thing that people said about me pretty much unilaterally was, like the dictator. That's what they'd like to see more of, this kind of version of myself that was very like, okay,
mm,
this is what we're doing. I'm taking control. It's my way or the highway. Now, even as I'm saying it, there's a part of me that's like, ugh. But over these last sort of 10 years, I've I've grown into that a little bit more
Mm,
to the
yeah,
point where, there are times when I'm like, okay, we are doing this, and I'm not being a dictator really, but in the sense that I'm not being unkind to other people or not taking other people's thoughts into account, but that there is this sense of really stepping into that aspect of my
leadership.
leadership.
You know,
Yeah. And just,
leaders lead.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And just taking the time to practice that muscle, build that muscle.
Mm,
And I think that that's really important. And that's really what sovereign leadership is about, isn't it? Just
mm.
building that so that you're filling your, if you think of yourself as being a whole, but that there are kind of gaps, potentially there are gaps because you haven't used them. So you're a
Sort of
bit like a,
slightly unvisited areas need a bit
yeah,
more
or like,
football.
what's the cheese that's got holes in it? Is it Gouda
Edam,
or Edam or whatever, whichever one it is, right? But it's like, yeah,
Edam,
we're
Edam,
just filling in the holes.
yeah,
Emmental, that was the one.
Emmental.
We're filling in the holes, okay, so that by expanding our capacity, by building our muscles to be able to inhabit all of ourselves,
Mm.
yeah, which I
Yeah.
think is really important.
Yes, and it is a practice. Like, and for me, it was the other direction. Yes,
Yeah,
we'd probably like to see a little bit less of your dictator if we could, please,
yeah,
Thea. When I started,
yeah,
and um, and it was great. It was an absolute revelation when I stopped being the first to contribute, or, you
right,
know, the loudest voice in the room. Just it was great. Just suddenly listening to other people and thinking, oh, that seems to have been done. Somebody else did that thing. That's awesome. I don't have to do it.
yeah, yeah,
It was just great how much
mm,
it freed me, and how much easier it became. And also my relationship with people just started to change.
yeah,
Um,
mm,
yeah, it's really cool. And I
brilliant,
think it then takes us to that connection point that we witnessed this week, the synergy of what people were getting.
mm,
Because like when you're working on expanding your own range, you start to feel more aligned to other people in their range, or to those
mm,
qualities in other people that you may have found alienating or off-putting or challenging or inspiring and amazing. And then suddenly you realize you've got that. And I really like that aspect of kind of connecting to other people through broadening our own experience and our own way of being in the world, but also um, how much in these sessions people come back from the breakout rooms, from sharing what they've experienced, going, I can't believe I was in a room with this person who had almost exactly the same experience as me.
yeah,
And bearing in mind, we don't even lead with a question anymore in sovereign dialogue. We let people take their guide from their own body
mm,
and follow that, and let their sovereign um, take them to the place that they need to explore on that day, or that it's true for them to dialogue about. And yet what we find again and again and again is people come back from the breakout rooms having had a real parity of
mm,
experience. And then, to the extent, I loved this example this morning of when
yeah,
we had two people talking about, one said, and then I introduced the, please feel free to share what you want to, share what you realized, share what you got, share your favorite color if you want to, and I've never said that before. Just a
mm,
little joke at the end. And then two, sure enough, two of them said, and then we had this whole thing about color come up. And I was like, you what?
yeah, 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 brilliant. I used to have a client who did some quite significant leadership training. And one of the things that he sometimes used to share with me, some of the kind of more hardcore military stuff that he would share. And he was kind of like in counterterrorism and stuff like that. So he was quite a character.
Mm,
And what he said in one of these examples was it was his turn to lead the group, and what he learned from that experience was that it was his role to sense the space. So it wasn't his role to get into the weeds. It was his role to be able to have a kind of panned back view.
Mm,
Yeah. A little bit like in the olden days with in the type of warfare when two armies would meet on a battlefield and they'd fight face to face, like with swords and whatever. And that the general's role was to be on the hill, and generally it was a he, would have a full view of the whole battlefield on both sides so that he
mm,
was able to make the strategic decisions that needed to be made from a distance so that he could win the battle.
mm,
And this client was saying a similar sort of thing. It was my role to sense what was really going on so that I could then send people to write, like, you need to deal with this and you need to deal with that, and no, 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 no. So he had oversight over the whole thing. And it really strikes me that this idea of connecting, it's like sovereign is like this um observer
mm,
who's sensing what's going on inside of me, definitely, but also sensing what's going on in the space all around me, and also sensing what's going on in the space, inside the people that, I might be sharing the space with or might be sharing the room with.
mm,
So there's all of this. What I'm becoming aware of is that there's all of this sensing that's going on that isn't really happening on a conscious level necessarily, although I might get kind of spikes of awareness, in a conscious way. But that what I notice is that because of that sensing, it's like sovereign is guiding what it is that I'm saying and what it is that I'm doing to dance with that.
mm, mm.
And I think so there isn't really anything to do really
Yeah.
other than just to let go. But it's kind of noticing that more and more as being part of the process that seems to be happening.
Yeah, yeah, really, yes, very much. And I think that because part of sovereign leadership is to become more attuned to those different perceptions, um, that can be called all sorts of things: intuition, insight, bodied awareness, wisdom, whatever they are. The subtle the subtle indications that we have once we can step out of the field of our narrow responsive spot response to patterns and stimulus in our life.
Mm,
When we can step out from that and open up our view,
mm,
and we can hear or see or notice the different things that are happening, so you become more aware maybe of somebody's body language. Because I wish I could remember these numbers, or indeed remember where this came from, so that I could, actually cite it as fact. But we receive hundreds of billions of bits of information in any 1 second,
yeah.
and we can process tens of billions, let's say.
Mm,
Um, and and then our and so of the hundreds of billions that are available, we select what we notice and see that fits our worldview, that fits our pattern, that fits our reaction. So we might, if our type is a kind of forward thinking, forward looking, then you might not see the person in the room who's going, oh, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure this is, and that person might have an incredibly important view, but you're so caught up in your own energy of, like, onwards and upwards, that you don't see the clues that somebody else is giving you, that maybe you need to stop and get further information or change tack, because you're going to make a bad move any moment, potentially, particularly if it's military or whatever. um, and so that opening up of perception, I think, is what then brings the connection and then the synchronicity that people experience.
mhm, mm,
There's we're being able to pick out those bits of information that align with the bits of information that somebody else has got as well.
Yeah.
And so that's why we experience a sense of, oh my God, I got the same thing, or I was in a very similar place as you were in this exploration, or
Mm.
in my dialoguing with this. And it does feel like magic. And it is magical, really.
Yeah,
And it's not, because it's just an opening up of the sources of information available to us, so that we've got more to pull on than we do when we're in our reactive pathways.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think there is also something about doing the practices that help to deepen that awareness.
Yeah,
So the meditating, embodied the embodied practices, the letting go, the softening, um the sovereign dialoguing,
yeah.
it's
Using your imagination is a
yeah,
practice.
all of those practices that often people do those practices because they want to get better at them. Yeah, obviously, that there is that kind of cause and effect aspect to it, but then there's also all the sort of incidental other benefits that come from something that you would never normally have thought about when you were originally said that you were going to do this practice, but it
Mhm.
does have this incredible knock-on effect over time. And that's the thing that I'm also really noticing. Like I was thinking just the other day, yeah, this process of embodied awareness started for me in a very conscious way in 2019. When we started the embodied facilitators course, when we were yeah, suggested to have these kind of 30-second check-ins a day sort of
Mm.
thing. And now where I think I've come over these last sort of 7 or 8 years of being so much more aware of myself and being able to describe it in so much more detail and just being able to kind of just drop into it at choice, and then move on. It's just a really yeah, it's just one of those lovely moments where it was like, oh right, I can actually see how far I've come,
Yes.
which yeah, was a real kind of like yay
Mm.
moment. So for
Yes, and
anyone
I
out
think,
there that's listening that's like uh you know it feels quite hard at the beginning, is yeah, it gets easier and the benefits are, you just can't even imagine what the benefits are going to be. um but there will
yeah,
be loads of them.
absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's really important for us as facilitators of this work to remember where we started, and to remember that people that we're working with now, I mean, we hear it because we listen to their feedback, we listen to where they're at, but it is great just to hear just how much they get, though, even from a standing point of very beginners, never done this before.
Yeah,
Nevertheless, like it's not a difficult thing, and that information starts to expand very, very quickly, I think,
yeah,
in
absolutely.
quite, you know amazing ways. We're always listening to the feedback of our group, going, oh my God, that, I can't believe you got that. That was amazing.
Yeah,
Scribble, scribble, scribble. Mind if
yeah,
I use that later?
exactly. Yeah, which is kind of what we're doing in these sessions. Yeah,
Yeah,
kind of taking advantage of the wisdom of other people in the community, and obviously doing it in a confidential
mm,
space.
mm,
Cool. So feels like that's a nice place to wrap up there. So thanks again. It's been a real joy to explore this topic of sovereign leadership with you again, Thea. And thanks
likewise.
to all the people that inspired us to have this conversation.
Yeah,
So
very
we'll be
much.
here. Yeah, we'll be here next week. And until then, if you want to join us on the Sovereign Dialogue sessions, they're Tuesdays at 7 UK in the evening and Thursdays at 8 a.m. in the morning UK time. So great.
Good luck with your car.
Thanks very much. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.